Hey, Jean, how are you doing?
I unmute myself for a second and say hello. Hello. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. All right. I'll mute myself.
Sounds good.
Hello, Paul.
Yeah.
Hi.
We're going to give people a few minutes to, I mean, we're not even at the top of the hour yet, but we're just give people a few minutes to join in.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hi, Mike Leach.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Yourself?
Good. We're just letting people come into the meeting. We're just at the top of the hour now, and we are going to be starting shortly. For those of the people on the line, there are a few of you. If you've got a generic handle on your profile, on your Zoom profile, I see somebody with iPad, somebody with iPhone, first name only. Could you please just update your profile to have your real name? We're trying to keep this to town meeting members, so and other invited guests. So if you're not using your real name, please do. And if you're a town meeting member and you want to add on what precinct you represent, not required, but also nice. And then as people ask questions, we'll just ask them to identify themselves by name. So if you're first name only, like Stu, who just joined, or you've got some other random name on your profile, just please update it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. This is really great attendance. It's really great to see. And let's just see here. You can use the chat feature as well to chat with me or I think with other attendees. And again, for folks who've just joined, if your Zoom profile is anything other than your real name, just update it. And you can update it by clicking in the little three dot. If you go to your window where you are, where your video is showing or your profile picture, and click on the little three dots button, you'll see something called rename, and then you can fill in whatever name you want. But in this case, it would be your real name. Still got people coming in here, so just going to give it a couple more minutes. Hold on.
Paul Roberts, or the Security Ledger.
Paul, I think you're muted. It's good. You got one rehearsal in for the first little bit. Now you can do it again.
I only do like 100 of these, so you'd think eventually I get the hang of it, but Sorry about that. Thanks everybody for joining, and we still got people coming in, but it's slowing down a little bit. So I want to get us going because we do have a pretty busy agenda. This is just an information session for town meeting around Article 10 regarding withdrawing Belmont's fire and police departments from the civil service. I organized this because I felt like what was being presented was good from the sort of town's perspective, but that we weren't hearing enough either from communities who have gone through this process or from our own fire and rank and file of our fire and police departments who would be the most impacted by this article. And so I put this together to kind of give town meeting members a little bit more information to work with and a little bit more of a balanced view. So our agenda is pretty straightforward. The ground rules are basically keep yourself on mute. Raise your hand using the hand raise feature if you want to ask a question. We've got a couple Q&A sessions set aside. We're going to hear from our first speaker first, but he's taken time out of his day to do this. So I'd like to hear from him and then do Q&As for him and then let him go. And then we've got some folks in the Belmont PD and Fire Department who want to speak. And we've got Regina Caggiano from Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Director of Civil Service. And we'll hear from them and then we'll do Q&A with them. So I just want to kind of, and raise your hand, keep yourself on mute, and you can use the chat feature to communicate with me or Aaron Picolingus, who's my co-sponsor, or I think with other town meeting members. And without further ado then, I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, our first speaker, who is Wellesley Fire Department firefighter Michael Leach. Michael, are you, let me just see, can I unmute you or can you unmute yourself? I'll unmute you. There you go. Hey, Michael.
I got it.
Got it?
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I guess the background of myself is I'm doing well, thank you.
So,
Can you hear me well?
I can. We can hear you really well. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then I think what we're really interested in hearing is sort of the Wellesley Fire Department's experience going through this process a number of years ago, and kind of what happened on your side, and then where you are now, and then of course your perspective as a Wellesley firefighter.
All right, I'll give a quick overview, and then, if you want to jump in with some questions to kind of prompt me one way or another, I'll be happy to do it. So, name's Mike Leach. I've been a Wellesley firefighter for 17 years. I was a union president for 9+ years through the time we went out of civil service. I'm no longer a union president. I'm still part of the bargaining team and very active in the town of Wellesley and the retirement board. Overview of civil service. Civil service was about years ago. The town of Wellesley voted us out of civil service without having a plan in place, and I wasn't there at that time, but at that time they voted us out. We didn't have a plan, and our members at that time had to go around to I won't say picket, but they went door to door to residents. They opened up a new town meeting, and they voted us back into town meeting 25 years ago. Fast forward to 2012 or 2011, our police department left civil service through collective bargaining, and 2012 was our turn, and we had the conversations with the town. We union lawyer at that time had discussions and then set up a plan to leave civil service. We've been out since 2012 now. Stopped here.
Looks like we've lost.
Oh, I'm back. Did you? I don't know how much you got, or
You said you were just saying you left after collective bargaining in 2011.
so 2011. So again, 25 years ago, they voted us out. We had to go back in. 2011, our police department through collective bargaining got out of civil service. We followed suit in 2012 when it was our turn. And we got out of civil service in 2012. And we've been out since. We've had hiring probably, I don't have the exact numbers, but we're up over a dozen to 15. And for promotional, we've had about 6 or 7 promotions through non-civil service.
So I guess there's a lot of questions that we have here. Do you have
Sure.
more? Maybe you could describe a little bit the difference between the experience if you were there 25 years ago, what that was like, in the sort of after making that choice versus the choice where it was done in 2011 or 2012. If that makes sense as a question.
Sure. So in 25 years ago, again, I wasn't here, but the stories of it was a very contentious time that the town said, let's get out of civil service. Then we're going to formulate a plan and go forward. And back then they said, you know, we'd never buy a house or invest in a business if we didn't know the plan. In 2012, when we got out of civil service, during collective bargaining, both sides had a partnership in it. And at that time, it was the political landscape was, felt that civil service was going to be leaving soon anyway, or was becoming underfunded. So we wanted to get out in front of it. We had conversations with the union body, and we had a really good, we had a good relationship with the administration at that time. And we worked together to kind of take a bunch of the civil service language that we liked, and some of it we didn't like, we left to the side in regards to hiring, promotions, layoffs, recalls, the stuff that civil service kind of controls. And we took some of that language over with us and tweaked it the best that we felt. With hiring process, we now have a union member that is not on the hiring committee, but is a witness to the interviews process, and at any time can throw a red flag and appeal to the board of fire engineers. Our town management system is different than Belmont's. We have a decentralized government here, so everybody has the board. So we can go to the board of fire engineers and complain about it, or throw up a red flag. Hiring process, we switched from having a strict civil service score to a written test, an assessment center, and there's a chief's. He has a percentage of the promotional. And then we took some information from the recalls and the layoffs and put that back in. So we kind of fashioned it the way we felt best. And as far as disputes or any sort of going to the Civil Service Commission in case of any sort of issues, we felt that most of our internal, I won't say fights, but disagreements with the town would go through arbitration more than it would go through the Civil Service Commission. So during collective bargaining, that conversation was happening between the town and myself constantly, and we passed information back and forth, and we went into this thing as a joint effort. My feeling then and my feeling now is that we were embarking on almost like a new business, and what you do in a new business is you'd work with your partners to kind of come to a conclusion which best suits both sides. And that's what we did. There are things we would change, now, but we were the first ones out. So we had nothing really to fall back on.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot of great detail. I guess thinking about that joint effort where you work with your partners.
Sure. I'll change that to how long did it take for us to meet agreement? And it was a couple of months. I mean, at first the union was understanding that we would go down this road. So the union was okay with opening the doors. And as far as that concerns, we were the climate at that time, we felt necessitated us to have the conversation with the administration. So as soon as we got through that roadblock, everything kind of fell into pieces as we went on. And it probably took bargaining itself that year, I imagine, took 4 months, a couple meetings a day, a couple meetings a week to go over, a lot of communication back and forth to finalize it. And the reason I switched your question up a little bit is we didn't get it right. Civil service has been along, and it's not bad, but civil service, you know, has been around for a long time. And when they first came out, there was a lot of, you know, disputes and arguments and litigations to get the verbiage right, to get the understanding right. And you're going to have to expect that if you leave civil service, that the product that you sign right off the bat is not going to be the perfect product. You're going to have to leave yourself, if you guys decide to go through with this, an avenue to continue the partnership as you grow this business, grow this company. So we've hit some bumps in the road. They're not felonies, they're little misdemeanors as you go along, or however you want to put it. But you have to be able to put together a system in which the partnership does not end as soon as you sign that contract. The partnership continues. And if you do run into an issue, the town doesn't turn to you and say, bring it back up at bargaining. If you have an issue with what you wrote regarding the promotional process or the hiring process, and you want to revisit it, there needs to be an avenue for you to be able to revisit it without going to regular bargaining sessions. And that's on both sides. That's the union having issues with language, and the town may have issues with language. If you're building a business, there's going to be times down the road, however many years you want to put on it, where you're going to have to keep that window open for discussion to happen. It's almost like having you're all part of this board that needs to continue this business. And every once in a while, you have to have that board meeting to hash things out and move forward. It's all about relationships.
I think that is a great recommendation. My follow-up question to that is, when would you put that in place with versus in time relative to something like deciding and voting to leave civil service? Is that the kind of thing that you can put in place before? Because it seems like a good thing to do before. Or would you do it after? And I guess as a second part to that, not to complicate it too much, like how does doing it before or after impact the union versus the town's ability to negotiate?
Well, so I was a union president for 9 years. You know, I've been in the fire department 17 years. I believe that I am an employee to an employer first with union benefits. So, there's this 4-letter word that's been developed from unions. And I just want to say right off the bat, and I don't want to speak for Belmont Union, but unions want the best people hired and unions want the best people promoted. So you're starting from the same page. It would be easier if the conversation happened prior to anything happened. Because if you, and this is my, just my opinion, 100%, you guys do you, but if I was on the if I was on the Belmont Union, I would be nervous about being voted out before having a plan in place. Is that the question you were asking?
That is roughly, I think that answers both parts, which is the second part. I think you answered. I was asking, does it put one party in advantage to do it before or after? And I think you answered that. I
don't know if it puts any party in an advantage or a disadvantage, because it would feel like a disadvantage for the union, because now they're trying to put together language to a right that was just voted out. Conversely, for the town, now you face however many members of fire department or whoever you're taking out of civil service that is feeling slighted and or contentious. So if I
discussion,
yeah, so I don't know. How do you build a partnership when you already started already went down one road.
And
I mean, it's a difficult thing. So you're going to have a relationship, and you know, a good relationship starts with communication. I'm going to tell my wife that.
And Mike, excuse me if you already explained this, because I had to duck away to deal with getting somebody onto the meeting.
Sure.
Could you talk a little bit now about how this, so after all the bumps in the road that happened with dropping out of civil service, getting voted back into civil service, then reaching an agreement to come out again, what does the system look like now around things like hiring and promotions in terms of the model that Wellesley has adopted? Because right now for town meeting, we're being told that all the details of those are TBD. There are no details. You know, the chief is going to determine that after we drop out. So what is the system that exists in Wellesley now, just to give our members a sense of like, here's a model of how it might work in one community that's done this versus just open-ended, we don't know.
It's some things that have to work on, right? So the model that's been developed in Wellesley,
Perfect model, but
it's
right.
not the perfect model, and it's changed a little bit. Without getting down the road of, you know, litigating Wellesley's issues, I'll just tell you what the model right now is for the promotion, for the hiring process. The chief puts on a test, applications. We set up for the hiring process significant considerations. There's to put yourself, you know, maybe top of the list. That would be a veteran, somebody who lived in town, somebody who went to school in town, and somebody who has worked in town. So if you hit one of those considerations, you'll get put to the top of the list. Veteran, civil service has a veteran considerations, residency, somebody that lives in town. What we wanted to add in, and the union was okay with it, and actually kind of push for it, is if you ever went to school in town. And one of the reasons we wanted to put the school in town is Wellesley is not the most diverse town, and by putting in you can work in town, you go to school in town, it has the ability to grab any METCO students that may come to Wellesley that have already built up a relationship with the town of Wellesley because they've been here for so long. And you know, we will go to the schools and tell them about the test and all that, and if they remember it after they graduate, they can take the test. As far as working in town, we also put that in there because any job on the outside that you've ever gone to or been to, there's always like an internal posting. So we feel if you're an employee in town and you've done a good job and you have a good recommendation from your manager, you know, that could put you in a significant consideration moving forward. So then the list is established. The chief and his hiring board will set up the interviews, and then we come in for the interviews, and there's somebody from HR, somebody from, you know, the chief, a designee, and another person, you know, an officer, and then a union member to oversee the interview process. And then it goes through HR and they approve, and the final decision making is by the chief. But we have the ability to throw a red flag if need be. The promotional process, we went from civil service, you know, you own the score, so that is your slot. The chief would have to, if he had ever to skip anybody, would have to give a reason why you skipped. And we switched to, on the promotional process, you take a written test that accounts for, this is one of the bumps. So, and it's not been an issue in the past, and it won't be an issue, but it's something we're going to change. But so our written test constitutes 25% of the total score. We have an assessment center that accounts for 50% of the total score, and the chief's assessment that accounts for 25% of the score. And the reason we put the chief's assessment at 25% is because the union lawyer at that time felt it was a good way to put forward, because like I said, unions are interested in hiring the best people and also promoting the best people, and that 25% of for the chief score would allow the chief, or would allow a member who took the test who may not be the best test taker, but a very valuable employee and somebody who's been there for a long time, to have that counted towards an overall score. And then a list is established off of that.
Okay, so it's a weighted score based on these three different elements, basically, one of which is the chief, but it isn't entirely up to the senior management of the chief, right? So that's
No, I mean, the 25% is
influential.
yeah, and again, I won't, you know, that's Wellesley's own issue, so.
So we have a member who has a question. I don't know, Mike, are there other points that you want to make, or Aaron, are there other questions you want to ask Mike before we move to town meeting member questions?
No, I think Mike, I asked long and complicated questions and he answered them well. So I'm all set.
Now I'll take questions. You know, I'll take questions definitely.
Okay. Adriana, are you there?
Yep. Okay.
There you are. Go ahead. Now you're muted now. Hold on one sec. Hold on one sec.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, you did it and I did it. So we kind of, yeah, sorry. So here's my question to you, which is very basic, and I might be the only one. Maybe everybody is very versed in all those terms. So I have no clue anything about the civil service, right? So I looked the definition in the general Massachusetts general law, and it's very dry, the definition, and it refers to the civil service merit system. Can you talk, so it helped me like zero, right, to understand more like the difference between the civil service and, yeah, right, so I need a little more beef to this to understand. So, and if I'm the only one and waste everybody's time, I can talk to you off the meeting and I can learn more, but maybe I'm not the only one, I don't know. So
I'll bring up what I know, but I also know that you have a speaker from civil service coming up later in your Zoom. So civil service is a municipal run organization that oversees hirings and promotions through civil service. So when somebody if the town is hiring somebody, they reach out to civil service to get the list. Civil service then sends the list. If you're going for a promotion, then the town, it goes to a civil service list as well. They'll take a civil service exam and get the scores back from civil service. So they are kind of a overseer of, of things. But your speaker at the end, I believe, will be able to lay it out a lot better than I did.
We have a question from Jean Mooney, which is asking to please explain the assessments that are part of the score. I assume that you mean specifically for Wellesley's current system.
So the assessment center is much like a lot of towns do it. The city of Newton, I believe the city of Newton. I know Natick does it, Needham does it, and it's part of a lot of, you can do it through civil service too. Civil service, Natick still has civil service, Needham still has civil service, and it's just an added component through collective bargaining that they put in, that you go in and have a interview of different scenarios with a company from the outside, and they'll give their own score to that. And then however the town decided to weigh that, it weighs against your civil service score. Do you want more information? I mean,
we have Regina Caggiano from Civil Service who's going to speak a little later, so she can answer any of those questions. So let's try and keep the questions for Mike specifically on kind of what he's expert in, which is Wellesley's experience going through this. Chris Doyle from Precinct 1, how you doing? Go ahead and ask.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. A quick question. Thank you. First of all, thank you for joining us. It's generous of you, especially on a weekend and a Sunday. So one thing that I've heard people mention is that the possibility of corruption coming about in a hiring system without civil service. And I'm wondering I think you said 2011 or 12, so in the 8 or 9 years since Wellesley left, has there been corruption in the public safety hiring system?
I'm not gonna litigate. I'm not gonna talk about Wellesley's issues too much. What I'll say is that the union does have a way to throw in that red flag, and that we have an ability to complain about it. If I were to put in a different system, Wellesley is a decentralized form of government. It works well in here in Wellesley. I'm not sure what Belmont is, and there's a chain of command here that goes through the board of directors. And so as far as if you're flat out corruption, I don't know of any corruption.
Okay. All right, thank you for your.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Benny. Benny Mesoham. Go ahead and ask your question. Benny. Hey, Benny, do you want to ask your question or?
Yeah, sorry about that. I having unmuting problems. Yeah, I'm Benny Mishulam. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 7. This is a incredibly elementary question, but I feel like I would find it helpful because I'm really not familiar with this, and maybe this is the wrong sort of forum to be asking this. But what are arguably the upsides, or why is the town proposing this? Is it cost savings, and if so, where would those cost savings potentially come from? I mean, I appreciate that, I've gotten a lot of correspondence from, public safety unions making their case against this, but what's the bottom line kind of argument that one would make in support of this? I mean, nobody feels comfortable making this. I'm sure I'll hear plenty at town meeting, but I think it would be helpful to sort of hear that. Again, might be the wrong group to be asking, but
I'm not sure of any cost savings the town would incur from coming out of civil service. But to go back to Chris's, we hired a lot of very, very good employees here, and getting out of civil service gave us the ability to, not saying that civil service employees are poor employees. I'm saying that we were able to go out and, find people that we feel had more of an ability to hone in on members that we'd want here at the fire station. So as far as cost savings, I'm not sure if there's any cost savings, just more of a internal control of the process.
okay. So is it fair to say that what towns often argue when they're in this position of proposing this is it gives them more flexibility? Is that kind of
flexibility? Yeah. Yep. Very much so.
Yeah. Okay.
And
okay.
yeah,
right.
Very much so.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm just going to step in to add that the town, if you look, the town has done a few different versions of a presentation that largely argue in favor of this, that outline the reasons that they think it's a good idea. And so I think if you look at the warrant committee, there's an email we got as town meeting members that link to the presentation they did there, and you can look through it. I think they spoke a lot more than there is text in them. You can get a pretty good overview from that. And they will definitely be presenting the pros at the reasons that they want to do at a town meeting.
And
okay, thank you very much.
Michael, we had a question as well, just to clarify, in Wellesley, who is the appointing authority? Is it the Board of Selectmen or the fire chief?
Great question. It's the our Board of Fire Engineers, which default is the Board of Selectmen. The chief will make the recommendation to the Board of Fire Engineers.
And
they are the appointing authority.
Was that always part of the plan, or that was part of the plan that you worked out in negotiation with the, town administration as part of the back and forth of how the system would work?
It's always part of the plan, even with civil service. It was part of the plan. Even though civil service gives the list and the recommendations, the Board of Fire Engineers are the ones that are the appointing authority. So we just carried that over.
And the Board of Firing Engineers, which sounds pretty technical, but actually that's just your
It's just our selectmen, yeah.
Well, they're not really fire engineers.
They changed their hats. They're all great people.
Right. But if my house is on fire, I probably don't want to call them.
Right. No.
Okay, next up, Judy finally. Judy, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I appreciate your answer about corruption. What about favoritism or nepotism? Civil service has always been considered a defense in those areas.
Sure. Great question. I guess what I'll say is, if you looked at the roster at the present and you looked at the roster 25 years ago, you're going to find at the fire department there are going to be a lot of similar names. It's the cobbler's son becomes the cobbler. It's a traditional fire department. I became a firefighter just because I wasn't smart enough to become a police officer. My father was a police officer, and there's a lot of that happens here. So I will say we have very quality employees. It does open the door a little bit, but under civil service, we had a lot of the same names also.
But an intensification of that, and I will point out again, two of the people on the Belmont Fire Department right now are sons of the chief of fire.
They were probably born and raised and saw it and aspired to be it.
Whatever. But I'm
Sure.
just,
yeah.
To Judy's point, this is, absent. Well, to Judy's point, this is a question that we should be asking, and in theory that there should be some kind of policies or controls around, because it can.
Yeah. So I guess branching off that, and I know there's a lot of questions along that. One of the things I would say to Belmont is you'd have to have communication throughout that doesn't involve collective bargaining. You guys are in a partnership. Additionally, there should be a way to, if you go to civil service, you're going to go through a mediator if you're going to have a discuss or argue any sort of issues that you have. And Wellesley doesn't have a mediator. So if we have an issue, it goes straight to the Board of Fire Engineers or through our fire chief, and it becomes an issue. If there was a way to have communication through where there's a mediator, that would be great too. Some of these issues that may have come up would be resolved. I guess I'm.
Yep. Let's see. Judy, I'm putting your hand down because you asked your question.
No, you didn't.
Oh, what was the question?
I'm Judith Fine. You had Judy Fine.
I had two.
I'm Judith Feinleib.
Go ahead,
People
Judy.
mix us up all the time. But what I want to ask, is, and I'm from Precinct 6, what I'd like to ask is, all of this that you put in place, am I correct? This was all done before, I take it Wellesley has a town meeting, but all before town meeting voted to leave civil service. Is that correct?
That's correct. Civil service, the way civil service, so in order to leave civil service, you have to be able to vote it out the way it comes in. And I don't know if your police and fire were both put into civil service in the same, under the same, I'm not gonna, a bill or article, but it has to be voted out in that same way. So in Wellesley, there were two separate articles that voted in both police and fire and voted out. That's why the police were allowed to leave in 11 and we were allowed to leave in 12. And we had a majority of the language already put together because our promotional process, our layoffs and recall, general order for hiring were all in the contract. So that had to be ratified at town meeting. And that was ratified at town meeting, the same town meeting in which we were then.
We are being asked to vote out civil service before any of the negotiations you've discussed have happened. And so what I'm attempting to do is clarify for anybody who's here that you guys actually went through, you had processes and procedures in place that you all agreed on before you ever went to your town meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Judith.
Brian Corsino is next. Brian, go ahead and speak.
Oh, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Leach, actually a few. I'm sorry, I didn't catch his first name. I got on here a few minutes late. But
Mike.
he kind of, is it Mike?
Yep.
Hi, Mike. I am a lieutenant on Belmont Fire. I've been on for 17 years, like yourself. So I've been on for a while. I've seen a lot. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, and just to kind of piggyback off of what Judy just said, what I'm having a hard time with, and I think maybe some of the other town meeting members, which they're being asked to do, it's kind of like, would you go to buy a car? Would you drive a car off a lot without going over your payments or the lease details? And I feel like that's what the town's kind of asking us to do, or asking the town meeting members to do before they have all the facts. And so that, and did you say that the fire engineer board has the last say on who is hired and promoted?
They're the appointing authority, yeah.
So they go off of a recommendation from
The fire chief.
From the fire chief, but they have the last say.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we talked about civil service having checks and balances. Who does the checks and balances on the town side for you guys? I mean, who makes sure that there is no corruption, favoritism, nepotism, things like that?
The Board of Fire Engineers. And like I said a little bit before, it's the Wellesley town government is a little different, very much works here, but we have a executive director, we don't have a town manager, and we have the Board of Fire Engineers who are the select persons. So the checks and balances would be through a grievance process or unfair labor practices and litigation. Would be that.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
We've got two more questions. I'm going to get to them, and then I'm trying to be respectful of firefighter Leach's time. So I think that's going to be it for questions, and then we'll move on to the rest of our presentation, if that's okay. First is Fitzy Cowing. Fitzy, go ahead. You're up.
Hi, yes. My name is Fitzy Cowing. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 8. One of my questions is, we're being told that there are substantial cost savings here, but it's my understanding that the majority of towns who have exited civil service did so with fairly reasonable packages in terms of either fully funding Quinn bill or salary bumps. And I'm just kind of wondering if you can speak to, when Wellesley left, was there any kind of COLA increase, salary bumps, education incentive money? Because I think that if Belmont negotiates out, it would be reasonable to expect that our firefighters and police officers would receive similar compensation to the surrounding towns, as that's what our town is saying they'll model after. And my gut tells me that if that's the case, that the savings will be substantially less than we're being led to believe.
Yeah, we negotiated out. It was part of our contract. The fire department, you hit it on the head. The police department put in a new educational incentive program. They, because at that time, that the state was not putting in their 50% of the Quinn bill. So the state removed that 50%, the town backfilled that 50%, and also put in a new educational incentive plan for new employees. the fire department received an educational incentive plan and another, I guess, 4 employees for associate's degrees and bachelor's degree. And we also had a legacy degree that if you had 20 years on the fire department, you got what was equivalent to an associate's degree and some other monies. So they paid for it. At that time, legislation deemed that if you were to get out of civil service, in order to get out of civil service, it had to go through an agreement with, let me back up. The town can take you out of civil service whenever they vote. But in order for us to agree to it, we negotiated it out. I believe there's legislation out now that Belmont's jumping on that states that towns can now take them out without having collective bargaining agreements with it. Something along the lines. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so we did get packages, significant packages for leaving. And I'm not trying to go against the town of Belmont. If they have, if they know of cost savings, then I'm sure they will show you.
Sorry, just to respond to that, however, as of now, we're not being shown substantial cost savings, but I guess my point is, if negotiations result in some form of compensation package, I don't think that you can tell us what the final cost is until you negotiate those. So my assumption would be that we can't vote in an informed way about what the total value or not of leaving civil service will be without knowing what would happen in that. And if we're being asked to model after Wellesley, Lexington, Burlington, et cetera, my guess is that the reasonable thing to do would be to also model after whatever compensation was provided to the firefighters and police officers. So I guess my point is that to do this without negotiations seems like it gives an unfair advantage. And also, if what you're saying is true about legislation, that they can force this, that perhaps this is being done so that they can avoid giving a reasonable compensation package, which would be disappointing at best. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Last question is Jake McNeely, who is Belmont Fire Department. Jake, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Just one quick question. I don't want to take this gentleman too much of his time. You had mentioned you guys got voted out civil service and then went back in. Was it the police and fire at the same time, both times that you were voted out, went back in, and then the police and fire came out at the same time, or were they separate?
That's a great question, and I'm not 100% sure. I believe it was both police and fire. I'm pretty sure it was both police and fire at that time, and the argument was that they took us out differently than they put us in, and that we had no plan going forward. I'm not 100% sure. It's a good question. I wasn't there at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday to come and talk to us and tell us. Is there anything
Sure.
that we didn't ask you that you want to say, or any final points or comments you want to make before we let you go?
Sure. To close, Wellesley getting out of civil service, it was a partnership to get out of civil service, and it has worked. There's been relationships between the administration and the union. There's also been some rough patches, but that's expected. The lieutenant of Belmont brought up a good point about if you were to buy a car, would you want to know what the lease payments are, how many miles per gallon, and so on and so forth you get. And I'm not saying, again, I always have considered myself an employee first with union benefits. So getting out of civil service was not a poor decision on our part. And if it's properly planned and it has support, it's not a bad thing to go forward. I hope Belmont goes through the right routes of bringing their union in and having discussion and forming a partnership. And I think you guys can do great things.
Mike Leach of Wellesley Fire Department, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate
Paul, Paul, would you excuse me? I thought that Ross was trying to ask a question. I might be wrong, but I thought I saw him waving his hand. And if that's the case,
Ross,
yes.
his hand is not raised virtually.
No, it's not raised
Mhm.
virtually, but I saw him waving like that. So it might be that he hasn't figured out how to do this yet.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, Ross, go ahead. Sorry.
And maybe we can tell him how to do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Thanks, Mike, for coming on. I just wanted to piggyback on something that was brought up about having multiple people from the same family and cobbler's approach. And I agree that there is that. At one time, we had 3 members from our department, all with the same last name, a father and 2 sons. The only difference is that was done through civil service. And for the members of the fire and police department, I know Chief McIsaac had said something to me, what has civil service done for you? And I told him that it hasn't had to do anything. And that's the best part about it, is that it's like homeowners insurance or car insurance. If you'd never use it, so well, but if you need to use it, it's great to have. And I think what Mike explained, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, is that there are some bumps in the road, and those bumps of the road are going through arbitration and different things like that. And I just don't see any need to go down that road if we don't really have to. We've had a system in place with civil service for over 100 years. It's continually evolving, continually getting better. And it just, for me, it doesn't make any sense. And it might work for Wellesley. That's, if it is, and you guys are still trying to work through stuff, awesome. But for me, that protection and guidance would for the townspeople would be insurance as well. So there is no lawsuits and there are no problems. And I'm not saying that there's a problem with either of our chiefs or past chiefs, but we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. We don't know who's going to be in there. It just takes one bad apple to really upset the whole apple cart. And I'm not so sure that a system that you constantly have to kind of rework as you go is something that we need to do, since we already have something in place. We can certainly enhance it and find out ways to enhance hiring practices and flexibility. I mean, there's tons of different things we can do, but I just wanted to make that point because I know there are some people with the questions about, multiple people with the same last name, but that was just my point. And if you had any other comments, Mike.
I think, that's a great point, Ross. Civil service and Wellesley getting out of civil service worked for us at that time. In our community, we felt it was, we could do it and we can control it. Belmont, you guys have to kind of look at yourself, and you're closer to the city. There's more, there's more people at your fire department. There's more moving parts, and it's a different form of government. And, you brought me on to talk about Wellesley's leaving civil service, and that comes with the understanding that Wellesley is a different animal. So, when you guys get together and you have your discussions, you just, I don't know Belmont. You guys know Belmont more than us and more than me. And it's your decision, and it's a decision that should be a partnership with those losing said rights.
Right. The takeaway I get, Mike, is as with most things, it's always better to have a plan than to not have a plan. And while your non-plan may make the road ahead look smooth and glassy, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be. And that's why it's better to have a plan, kind of anticipate some of the bumps in the road, and has thought about those in advance and worked out a way around them. Yeah,
exactly.
Mike, thank you so much. I'm gonna, and you're done. Thank you.
Sure.
Feel free to hang on. I'm happy to have you hang on. We're going to go ahead now and talk to members of our fire department and police department, some of whom we've heard of already. And Ross, let's just see. We've got. Do you want to just do fire and police together just for the sake of time?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
So from, let's just see, from Belmont.
Hey,
Yep.
Paul, I'm going to sign off. This is you guys' battle, and I wish you all the best, and please be safe and be well.
Thank you so much. Take care, Mike.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's just see. So from right now from Belmont Fire, Ross, we've got you, Dave, Brittany, and Jake. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And excuse me, from the from Belmont Police, we've got and let's just make sure they're all on the all here with us. We've got Kristen, Corey, and Mike. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Okay. And can you guys all are unmuted and can talk, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So thanks all of you for coming in and speaking, for joining us today. And I think, again, we've heard a lot from the town side of things on, what their thinking is around this, but I thought it was very important that town meeting members also hear from members of our police and fire departments about your thinking about this whole process and, I guess what you would like to see or what a process is that might work for you, to achieve some of the objectives that the town wants to achieve in terms of flexibility in hiring and, all those things. So I'll leave it to you. I don't know, Ross, do you want to start and Kristen, maybe you after? Or
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So, I just want the folks to know that the unions are very willing and open to speaking about anything in regards to civil service. We just want to make sure that it's an open discussion both ways. We've heard, let me back up just a little bit. I'll go back to last fall when the town came to us, came to Kristen, Corey, and myself, looking to have a meeting, and we got to that said meeting, and it was discussed that the town would like to take the police and fire departments out of civil service. Of course, we were a little bit taken aback because civil service is obviously very important to us, as you can tell by the debate that's going on right now. So the meeting didn't go awesome. It got fairly heated. We decided to take a break. The town asked us to come back to another meeting to stay in civil service. And we did that. We had our thoughts of what we wanted to stay in civil service for. And the town had come to us saying that they wanted more flexibility and they thought it was going to be a cost savings and a quicker process. Things kind of died down for a while. There wasn't really any talks. When the talks were set, what I was trying to say is that the talks ended, it was around November-ish, end of November. And then we're into the holiday season. And then right around the end of December, beginning of January, the town had asked us to start talking about our collective bargaining agreement, which is our contract that was due to expire. It expired this June 30th of 2020. Once we started a back and forth of wanting to get to negotiate and set up dates for negotiations, that kind of puts everything that we need to talk about from that point. So we made that known to the town that, anything that we discussed from this point on is to be at the main table, and we are open and willing to talk about anything. And like I said, we just wanted to make sure that the talk is truly open, that if we listen to the town about coming out of civil service, that they would also listen to us about ways to address their concerns while keeping us in civil service. And we would be totally open to talking about any of that at any time. So Kristen and Corey, you can certainly give the police point of view.
Yeah, Kristen.
Ross, I just, well, you had just mentioned it because I know some people had talked about it, so I don't want to forget. Speaking to some town meeting members, there seems to be a little bit of confusion about the difference between civil service and collective bargaining and the role of the unions. So as the town has presented before, the civil service has been in place since the 1890s. Belmont adopted it in the early 1900s, and we've been in it for a while. As far as public safety unions go, and collective bargaining, nationwide, those really didn't start becoming common until the late 70s, early 80s. And while there are a few things that civil service and collective bargaining share, there's more differences than there are commonalities between the two. So for example, you know, civil service, the main function is hiring, promotion, and then what's the word I'm looking for? Discrepancies as far as whether it be discipline or being skipped promotionally or stuff like that. Collective bargaining and the union side of it is much more in depth. That you know, that's going to be our base pay, our cost of living allowance increases, health benefits, vacation, sick time, and so and working conditions, the basic working conditions. So there are a couple things that overlap between civil service and the collective bargaining agreements between the town and the individual unions. They're not one and the same. And our biggest concern is it keeps being put out that, you know, well, all these things can be just collectively bargained, some of the issues that have been brought up. Our biggest fear is if this is kind of, I mean, to call a spade, this is kind of, you know, how can we be sure that the collective bargaining for anything, that whether the town votes us out or not, is going to be a fair process? And our biggest concern is overall, Belmont's government is a legislative body. And when you start doing things like this and taking you know, the legislative process away from town meeting members and putting more power towards the select board and the town administrator, it doesn't just become a civil service issue. Like, if this happens with us, what prevents the town from doing it with the DPW, the light department, school department, the secretary's union, library? So that's one of our biggest concerns. And not having the appropriate time to speak, not having the appropriate amount of time to raise questions, it's concerning to us as to how fair of a negotiating process it will actually be. But I just wanted to, because I know that there have been some town meeting members that were a little confused that civil service and collective bargaining were being discussed interchangeably and weren't really sure that there was a difference between the two. And if Ross or Kristen want to add anything to the collective bargaining process that I left out, or Corey, but I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that there's a difference between the two.
Kristen Daly.
Hi, Lieutenant Kristen Daly. I'm the president of the Belmont Superior Officers Union. And I guess, you know, one of the big things is that, as Ross had mentioned, our contracts expired basically June 30th, July 1st. And all this time, again, I'm not sure about the fire, but we really, I've never really even talked with the town about negotiating. And all of a sudden, this comes into town meeting without much notice when we've had, oh, I don't know, about 6 months that we could have been negotiating. Granted, COVID didn't help. And I know with the town, we understood in the beginning with the lack of negotiations due to COVID, but with Zoom and everything else, we could have some, actual useful negotiations, but I just don't understand why we've had all this downtime with no negotiations, and all of a sudden they want to throw this. And it almost seems like they want to come back to us and say, look what we got the town to do. Now you have no choice but to negotiate with us. And that I just don't like. I've been a union president for about 14 years. And yes, civil service has come up in the past, like the what ifs. And we've talked a little bit about it, but the town decided not to continue talking about it with us. So it's been there, and we've said we'd be willing to talk about it. But it wasn't even brought before. There's been no process of negotiations. There's been no talk at all. And now all of a sudden, there's having town meeting is going to be voting on it. And as you saw what Wellesley said, I mean, they went through a plan and a process. I mean, it's almost like they're leaving the employees who are going to be affected the most out of it. And I will say I do worry a little bit about in the future with potential of favoritism, nepotism, corruption. I mean, as I said, as a union president, there's been many times I've really wanted to make sure we have concrete language, because I've said to the chief, this is no insult to you, sir, but who do we know what's going to happen 10 years down the road? Who do we know? I also get a little worried about, the chiefs are non-civil service, and then you have a non-civil service department. Our chiefs answer to the selectmen, and they're the ones who renew their contract every 3 years. And then, a selectman wants something done, or, would like, basically kind of holds it over the chief's head. I just feel like many times things can be held over our head, just like right now, that if town meeting votes, then now that all of a sudden the town's going to be ready to negotiate and have that hanging over our head saying, we have to get this done. And it just seems really rushed without a lot of planning. And that's one of my biggest concerns. And it comes out that we don't want to talk. In the past, we have talked. I know all the unions have talked with the town, but then the town has decided that it wasn't something they'd want to pursue at the time. But now all of a sudden, the town has decided that they want to pursue it, but they don't want to talk about it with us.
Can I just piggyback on something what Kristen said? We have the same concerns, and yes, I am very concerned about the processes going forward. There's nothing to do with any of the present chiefs. It's an unknown factor. I know Chief McIsaac and Chief Haley came up through the civil service process. They worked their tails off, studying for tests, taking time away from families, doing all the right things. And it was an unbiased processes. So and I'm not saying that this is the way it is right now, but for me, we have a brand new chief. We have acting chief wants to become chief. These talks that the town came to us back in September and October about civil service, they were both assistant chiefs at the time, wanting the chief's job. Is there going to be a true dialogue if I was put in that position? I honestly don't know what I would do if my bosses are telling me we want to have bring the unions out of civil service. What am I going to do if I'm putting in for that job? I'm not covered by civil service anymore. They're non-civil service positions. They're at the beck and beholden of the people making the decisions whether they get the job or not. I know it makes me feel uncomfortable. I would prefer, and you still can have a chief's position in civil service. That would be ultimate, because then there's no way that a chief or any other type of position could be, it could go astray. And I'm not, like I say, I'm not saying it went astray, or it's just the possibility. Why would we want to open that door to that possibility? We can certainly work around any type of maneuverability in hiring candidates or getting people to come and take the civil service test to be a Belmont police officer or firefighter. We don't need to, reinvent the wheel. We can just enhance it. Take a process that's worked for a very long time that protects people and enhance it. That's all we need to do. And that just takes open discussion between the townspeople, the administration, and
hit the bison bone. And I was like, the bison.
is it my take?
We have a few questions for the Belmont Fire Department and Police Department. Before that, Ross and Kristen, I guess one question I think town meeting members might have is, are the police and fire department unions, or the rank and file as it were, kind of categorically opposed to leaving civil service for a town managed, in essence, private equivalent of civil service? Or are they really, obviously opposed to the way it's being done and the lack of details around what will go about going forward?
I guess the best way to answer that is, we've heard a lot of reason. They do a wonderful job for the amount of people in the state that take civil service exams, the appeals process, everything that has to do with the testing process. They have made those windows that I know some of the comments were that it takes too long to get a test results. All of these different things that thrown around 5 and 6 months. Maybe in the past, I don't know, that would be a better question for Ms. Caggiano. But I know the last fire entry-level exam we figured out was 105 days from the day that was the test to the list being made. And that includes a window for appeals. Ms. Caggiano could probably tell you how long that is, 7 days, 14 days, whatever it may be, for an appeals process. If anyone has got their score back and they feel that they got a question right instead of wrong, they can look at it and appeal it. And for the promotional, I believe it was 75 days. So with the part in our contracts that gives the ability to give a year's notice for when you retire, for a 5% increase in your pay for the year, you're doing a favor for the town and you're doing a favor for yourself. You're giving the town ample time to hire appropriately and as quickly as they want to. And it gives the employee a little benefit, and hopefully it would save the town any time and money spent in the hiring process, and have someone ready to go. There is always a list available. You take a civil service exam, it's good for 2 years. The next list does not come out until those new test scores are certified and ready to go. So it's just, like I say, it's all there to be used. It just has to be used appropriately. That's all.
I have a quick follow-up for that, but I just wanted to lead in a little bit about what the process I'm using here is. So this is Aaron Picklingus, town meeting member, precinct 6. I've been thinking about sort of a two-part decision here. One is whether we should consider leaving civil service at some point, whether that's a good idea to do in general. And two is whether we have the information and the plan in place that we need right now in order to do it now, right? So I think my question to you that's a follow-up on that is, let's say that we did know enough and had a plan in place. And this is a hypothetical. I'm not arguing that we have that now. Would the members of the unions in town be willing to consider something that does achieve the aims of increased ability to hire who we need to hire for inclusion and diversity, for example, and maybe some cost savings? Let's say through some miracle of negotiation and creativity and time, we achieve that. Are the unions willing to enter into a discussion about replacing civil service with a system that achieves a lot of the same things, but maybe also helps us achieve those other goals?
Yeah, I would say that the unions have always been open to talking about anything. That's how we get, a good processes for doing anything in our contract is open communication. What the issue that I see, and this is something that I would need to find out and know too, is the town is looking for the ability to make a more diverse department, right? And they're saying they can do that by their own tests. And I'm wondering, how is that possible? If through civil service you can't, and like I said, I'll let Regina Caggiano speak. I don't want to overstep my bounds, but you can't ask for a specific, a female only, or maybe you were trying to get a diverse, someone with a diverse background into your department. That has been litigated out. That civil service does not have that ability. How would the town be able to do that if they made their own test? And I don't want to bring up the slide that was shown the other night with Steven Tyler and Matt Damon and Serena Williams, because I think that was really, I don't think that was something that should have been shown. But what if the town did their own test and they were looking to get to a certain type of candidate that was 4th or 5th or 6th on the test, and they chose that person? What would the people above them that know they scored better do about it? Would they be suing the town to say that you overlooked me because I am Latino, or because I'm Caucasian, or I'm a woman, or whatever it may be? I don't see where we have that ability to pick and choose without having some sort of litigation. We live in a very litigious society nowadays. And if that isn't something that can be done, why would we leave civil service? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So,
okay. Ross,
from the police. Oh, I'm sorry.
So Regina Caggiano is on the line. She's the director of civil service for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and her name has come up about 5 or 6 times now.
Yeah,
I think it's probably a good idea to pull her into the conversation, let her introduce herself, because I think, Regina, you could probably respond to some of these questions yourself, and that may answer some of the questions. I see a number of hands raised, some of them may be answered by you. So, Regina, thank you so much for taking the time Sunday to come in and speak to us. I think that speaks a lot to your dedication. And feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, good evening now. Might as well go right into evening from afternoon. My name is Regina Caggiano, and I am the Director of Civil Service. I actually started in civil service back in 1999. I guess I just survived while others retired. So I have a pretty good foundation in civil service. My real role here this evening, and with anyone who asks a question about civil service, is to try and answer the questions to the best of my ability. Again, I have a few years, so that you guys can honestly make the best decision for your department, all right, or your town. I'm not looking to advocate one way or the other. That's absolutely not my role. But civil service is steeped in Mass General laws, personnel administration rules, and many other things. So whatever questions you have, I'd be more than happy to try and address.
Regina, I think some of the questions, I think one of the things you might help clarify for town meeting members is the image of civil service that's been presented by the town administrator and the select board is that it is extremely rigid, and that they can't, through civil service, hire the types of candidates that they feel like the town needs. For example, language diversity, people who are speak, in this town Mandarin or Hindi or Spanish. Gender diversity, ethnic and racial diversity, that, it's again, rigid. You get a list, you've got to pick one of the top names on the list, and those names aren't the type of people we need in Belmont. So I think that's probably one of the big things. If you could help us understand the tools and mechanisms that are available as it exists now, without changing anything to the town around hiring flexibility, that would probably help.
Great question. Honestly, the individuals on your list truly starts with recruitment. Typically about 6 months out to any entry-level exam, we start off a real recruitment campaign in order to get the word out there in the 172 police departments that there are under civil service. We use public service announcements, the billboards, digital billboards with Broom Mascot. We partner with many of our municipal departments to make sure that we put it on their police department websites. We look at minority newspaper online. We promote. I mean, each municipality knows their community the best. So however we can assist you in trying to reach out for a diverse pool is what we do. So once we have candidates take the exam, they are certainly ranked on the eligible list through a myriad of statutory requirements and then by score. So just about every single municipal department has residency preference applied. There is one that does not. Bourne currently will go in and out of residency preference, and you can do that at any time. The appointing authority could ask for a list of non-residents, but I'll tell you what that means. So amongst your residents, then we rank it by disabled veteran, veteran, and civilian. And with each one of those categories, it's done by score. If you choose not to have residents, then you would get our all list, which is available on our website, mass.gov/civil service. You can take a look at the eligible list and you will see it is ranked by disabled veterans, veterans, and then civilians. So communities would take a look at their eligible list, which is available right online, and they would say there's just no diversity. And we're having a problem in our police department in being able to communicate with our population who are Spanish speaking, as an example. So what we're looking for under a selective certification of any other type of fluency is under the personnel administration rules, where you're asking for a quality that is beyond that which we test. So the municipality needs to provide some data showing that need. We would need how many calls did you have, or how many individuals were you unable to assist due to the language barrier? Is there anyone in your department that currently is fluent in that language? So we would look at those data and statistics and approve or not approve a selective certification on language. And that holds the same thing with the gender certification. Again, in requesting a gender certification for the police department, you can't rely on 50% of our population is female. What we'd be looking for is, again, data in which the department had to interact with the public, whether it was care and custody, whether it was strip search, whether it was horrific crimes with women, in which you need a female police officer. So those are the kind of data points that we need in order to review it.
And Regina, my understanding is that there are requirements that civil service have, but then there are other requirements that might actually be local based in the bylaws of the town or policies that the town has adopted that are not mandated by civil service. For example, age requirements and so on. Is that accurate? What types of things are typically mandated at a local level versus by the civil service itself? And therefore, a town like Belmont could change unilaterally.
Belmont could choose to exercise age, whether or not they want an upper age or not in their municipality. Residency preference is another option that any municipality could exercise. Those are the two that come off the top of my head.
Okay, we have some hands raised. These could be for either Belmont FD, Belmont PD, or Regina, and I'm just going to kind of go. Chris Doyle, I'm going to start with you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, two quick questions, and thank you also for coming again on a Sunday. Very kind of you. I had one person made reference to the teachers in civil service. I had thought that teachers in Belmont weren't in civil service. So I'm wondering if you have members where some departments are in civil service and some aren't, and if that leads to kind of a unequal hiring situation. That's one question. And my other question to you is, you made a comment just now saying that 50% of the population is female, so that's not a reason to that doesn't come up as a criteria. I'm wondering, why isn't that the case? If Belmont doesn't have a 25% African American population, but if it did, or if another community did, is that a reason they could ask for that? And I'm trying to understand why gender as a population matter is not something that would allow for additional hiring of women. Thank you.
Good question. So I'm sorry, part one. The second part would be gender, but part one was, I apologize.
okay. My first question, and I don't know if it's for you or for someone else, but I think that our teachers are not in civil
Oh.
service, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong. And so I'm trying to understand, if civil service is a very significant employee benefit, are we in fact selling our teachers short? Are they in fact being treated unfairly by not being in the civil service system? And that's a question I have. It sounds like people believe there are a lot of benefits to this. And if that's the case, I'm trying to understand why we wouldn't provide those benefits to our teachers.
So teachers, I am not sure of. I will tell you that if Belmont is, like many other municipalities, under civil service, in reality, any employee that works for the town is probably a civil service employee. The difference is that if we haven't given an exam, they have no opportunity for permanency. The last non-public safety exam that we did was back in 1999. It was for building custodian and clerks. Since then, we have only been giving public safety. So regardless of municipality or state agency organizations, it's really the public safety that fall under civil service. Selective certifications is a bona fide quality that one would need to possess in order to perform the job. And again, it goes beyond that which we have tested. So it's not an affirmative action plan, rather than a documented need that you would need, that this person needs to be able to perform the job above someone else. So for rape instances, for sexual assault instances, that's where there would be a documented need for a female officer over a male officer. Those are ones in which we have reviewed and approved. Hope I answered that question.
I think you did. Judy Fines, you're next.
Thank you. My question / comment is for the union speakers from the police and the fire department. I was very struck by the number of references that firefighter Leach from Wellesley made to the strong partnership that needed to exist between the union and the town in order to work out a plan and then go through the departure from civil service. And I've been, I guess, wondering whether the recent behavior between the town and the unions describes the kind of partnership that would support moving forward. I'm distressed that there's not a better current working relationship, and maybe you can tell me whether that's just a recent thing or whatever, a long-term problem. Thanks.
I guess I'll take a hand at it. There are always going to be, some minor disagreements on issues. It's negotiation. It's called that for a reason. You negotiate. One party wants something, one party wants another, and you try to find a middle ground. I've said it numerous times in my contract negotiations, and I use the baseball reference. I always say I'm not looking for a grand slam. I'm looking for a ground rule double in something that we can live with for our membership in the unions, and it takes that. So it's always going to be repaired. There's always going to be some sort of something that you don't disagree on. It's just how you fix it. So we're, like I said before, we're open into discussing anything at any time. That's what makes a good relationship, and we're open to that. So
Ross, can I add to that?
It's important. Sure.
Lieutenant McNeely from Belmont Fire. As Ross alluded to, I think both unions, actually all three, because there's three involved, are more than willing to discuss any issues that come up and kind of come to the best solution. But it comes down to due process, and I think that's where you're seeing this lack of relationship is the due process is to come up with a plan, negotiate it very much like Wellesley did, and say, hey, if we do come out of civil service, this is what it's going to look like. So when you go to the table, you go to town meeting, you not only have a unified presence, but you also have detailed cost analysis of, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is how much coming out of civil service is going to cost the town. And I think when you see the rub, and obviously to the town meeting members, it's evident that we don't have a good working relationship, at least on this point. And that's because of the lack of due process and putting the cart before the horse. And based upon bargaining rules, now that the town has opened up bargaining with us, we don't have the ability to negotiate outside the table. So they've kind of cuffed our hands, if you will, by the manner in which they've done it. So I think that's the biggest point, and probably why you're seeing this adversarial relationship at the current moment.
I will say I agree with that. As I mentioned in the past, you know, we've had a contract that's, you know, needed to be negotiated since basically, I mean, we usually negotiate months ahead of time, but, you know, they haven't really sat down and said, listen, why don't we just start negotiating and we'll, you know, start talking about the civil service. Because as I said, I mean, I think also the other issue is I've been a Belmont police officer for 22 years. We've also had several different town administrators. So I always feel like, you know, on the police and least of the police and fire side with the negotiating, I've been there and I've seen so many different people pass through. And so maybe they're not aware that we've already talked about it, but we've tried to say it, you know, we're willing to talk about it. But the fact that the way it's going right now, as I said, it feels like they want to get the town meeting to, you know, make this decision, kind of be the heavy, so to say, and then come in and say, we've got this, now you've got to negotiate with us. And basically you've got to take what we're going to give you. It's what it just seems to me. It's not really fair negotiating of just sitting down and talking, because we've had plenty of time. There's been plenty of Zoom meetings. Again, when Corona first happened, we said, we understand, let's deal with Corona. But now everyone's kind of got a hand of things. Different meetings have all been coming, town meeting, board of selectmen meeting. We can obviously do negotiations via Zoom, you know, social distancing, but they're just instead just choosing to bring it to town meeting instead. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that helps our relationship.
It's a touch upon what Firefighter Leach said from Wellesley. You're trying to build a business, and we would want nothing more than to have a very good working relationship with the town administration. Because when you have a working relationship between, you know, the two parties that are quote unquote negotiating, there's no losers. It's a win for everybody. You know, you always want to have a good working relationship because it's easier to get things done. It's easier to get things done on the town side. It's easier to get things done on the union side. So it's to everybody's benefit if you're able to have a working relationship. And, you know, as Jake McNeely said, you know, our issue is the due process in this whole thing. But obviously, like, our stance doesn't change. We're still open to talk. We just want to have the opportunity to talk, and we want to have a good relationship. Because if we have a good relationship, it makes it so much easier for everything, not just this specific issue, but any issue that may arise down the road. You don't want to be arguing over stuff that doesn't need to be argued over. You just want a smooth working relationship.
Jim Kelly from Belmont Fire, you've had your hand up for a while. Did you already say your piece, or do you still have a question to ask?
Actually, Paul, I have not said my piece, but going back to that report the other night that was put on by the select board, the budget and the numbers and everything else such for the fire department, that's like an onion. If you actually peel that back, and I know they were talking about it could be X amount of weeks before a person goes to the academy. Well, sometimes they have to bring them on before because the town got grant money to hire those people. They have to be on the staff by X amount of date. So yeah, they might come on, they might be on day shifts until they go to the academy, which could be 2 or 3 weeks out. But you know, that's money that's not actually coming out of the town's pocket that was grant money. And then the other thing is just the promotional exam. The fire department has a promotional exam coming up in November. And one of the big questions is okay, I had until September 15th to sign up for it. That's $250 just for the test alone. Never mind another $800 or $900 for the books, the time away from my family. Time is, valuable and precious. So in my big thing is, we come out of civil service and I took that test. Now what? Is that money out of my pocket and that doesn't account for anything for promotion? So that's just another thing to think about. Number wise, for the townspeople, what we put into, going for promotion. And civil service gives that test and you go from there.
If you're going to make the investment, right, you want the benefit.
You're the best candidate for the job if you score the best.
Thanks, Jim.
Again, I just wanted to touch upon that meeting the other night. It's like an onion. If you actually peel back that report a little bit more and ask the questions, you'd find out what the actual budget is. So thank you and have a good day.
Mike Crowley, your hand is up. Go ahead.
So Mike Crowley, town meeting member, precinct 8. I appreciate our police and fire members and union representatives being on the Zoom, and I appreciate Regina Cacciano's being here. But I wanted to ask. So we're among the reasons that the town is putting forward for this proposal to leave civil service is the desire for diversity hiring. And I just want to understand, apart from things like language issues that I think Regina talked about, are there any provisions under civil service that would allow for preferences along ethnic or racial lines?
So currently under civil service, no, there are not.
Can I add a comment to that?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Mr. Crowley, Lieutenant McNeil from Belmont Fire. Along, the town or the administration uses these buzzwords: diversity, cost savings, etc. When we look at the diversity factor, some things that didn't come into kind of sight was the fact that Belmont, at least for the fire department, we have preferential hiring for paramedics since we run a paramedic level service. If you dive into that a little deeper and you go to the state database, which there isn't really a detailed database, but there's not a lot of diversity in the paramedic pool in general. So it comes down to level of service versus diversity. And that kind of ties your hands as well. It's not that you couldn't, if you could, you go out and say, okay, I want to do an African-American list or a Hispanic list or an Asian list, something along those lines. Now you have to look at the paramedics within that list. And the state doesn't really have a detailed list, but it's kind of my background is I've worked in emergency medical services for 22 years in one of the largest metro ambulance services as a supervisor. And I can tell you, if that populace existed, those people would be in those positions, and it just simply doesn't exist. So, I mean, one of the other questions that come up is diversity the issue, or is it level of service that we want to provide? And can we make a correlation to the diversity in other departments that are not in civil service? So look at the DPW, look at the school department, look at other departments, and if it was truly an issue, are those departments fully diverse? I mean, you heard Officer Pellerin talk about the diversity in the police department. Was last week, the week before. It's very, very diverse. You look at the fire department, we have 4 female firefighters who are excellent. And if you look at us in comparison to other departments, we have a very high number of females. We are very, very fortunate in that area. So I think, just using the word diversity doesn't really take a full comprehensive picture of, what the situation is.
May I add something to Mr. Crowley's comment, please?
Okay. So can I just clarify really quick? I wasn't commenting. I was asking. And I was asking because this is what the town is saying, and so I have an open mind here. I'm not professing any opinions. I was only asking.
And asking specifically if civil service could help facilitate minority hiring, and the answer is not really. Go ahead, Mike. I think you wanted to comment.
I know I'd already spoken about the diversity of our department specifically, which includes both the patrolman and the superior union. But one of the things I failed to mention that I think is appropriate, because it was one of the things that was brought up earlier, is language. So we have an officer who speaks both Spanish and Cantonese. We have an officer who speaks Greek. We have officers who speak Italian. We have officers who speak Armenian, and we have an officer who also speaks German. So we have quite a varied background as far as language abilities as well, which is beneficial for the makeup of our town. And Regina can also speak on this. That is one of the things that is listed on the civil service list, is you'll have people who have language abilities. Off the top of my head, I believe we have, who are on our current list right now, we have a Hindi speaker and a Spanish speaker. I could be wrong, but that is one of the things that is listed on there. In addition to, like, EMT or paramedic qualifications, there's a section on if that person has language abilities.
Hey, Paul, I just wanted to make a comment, if I could. We were talking about that Ms. Caggiano said about recruitment. That's the point where I think where Belmont might not be the most diverse community, that it really entails the point that we need to do a better job of going out to recruit. I know the fire union went to the chiefs probably a little over 15, 18 months ago about going to the high school and having a program at their college fair and making a video and doing what we can to capture. I know it's a very small amount. Belmont has an excellent school system, and I think it's over 98% of the kids go to four-year college. But there's still 2% there that may not. They might not be able to afford to go to college. They may not be able to have the means to do so, that we might be able to capture. As Jake McNeely said, that we run paramedic level service, ALS service, which is the highest you can on the street, other than having a doctor on an ambulance, that we have to keep up with that too. So we could easily try to go to paramedic programs, kids that are in paramedic school, reach out to them. There's different ways to help recruit, and that falls upon us, the department, the town, to maybe do a better job of recruiting people to our town. And the problem of candidates and recruiting is statewide. It's not germane to Belmont. This is a statewide issue. And like I say, Ms. Caggiano could probably expound more on it, but them going out 6 months ahead of a test to really start promoting is something that I think we really need to take a look at in both departments. And I will say that I did make the point last week that our armed forces are 42% of diverse nature. And like Ms. Caggiano said, you can come in and out of residency anytime you want. And there would be no issue of having one hire be a paramedic from Belmont or a paramedic in general, and then the next one be a veteran. Same thing with the police department.
Right. And if I might, and then we've got some more questions to get to, but I would point out that once again on this aspect of the town's plan, while there are promises of more diversity, there is not a specific plan that's going to show us how they're going to achieve those diversity hires. There may be a pipeline problem versus a hiring problem. And I would say, and as others people have mentioned, if you look across Belmont government as a whole, not just the public safety, it's not like non-civil service departments have a much greater diversity than the public safety department. So this is a town-wide problem. And again, if there's a plan to increase diversity, a concrete one, I would really like to see the details on that. Let me just see. Let me just go to Aaron. Do you want to ask your question, and then I'll go down the list?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, just thinking about hearing about this as we talk about diversity, and hearing from Regina about the process that towns can use in order to submit data and make requests for to meet their diversity hiring needs. Regina, I'm wondering if you can just speak to the amount or the manners in which Belmont has used the systems in place that you described in order to find candidates that meet the needs that they're claiming they need to make. If they want more diversity, they want to hire people who meet their needs. How have they done that so far via civil service?
That's actually a great question. And the individuals, the certification appointment specialist, will handle a series of communities. So I would have to ask them that question. It would either be James Barron is the assistant director of the certification team, and he has 2 people that report to him. They would have direct contact with each municipality. So I can find that information out for you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Next up is Fitzy Cowing. Again, go ahead.
Okay, I have one set of questions for Regina, and then I have a quick question for the 2 unions. I guess my first question I'll direct to the unions. You guys, so what I'm understanding is that you're currently working without a contract, which is just your basic working contract. Would leaving civil service be something that would normally be negotiated separately from your standard working contract? And then given that, do you feel that the fact that you also don't currently have a working contract puts you in kind of an even more precarious feeling position? So you don't have a working contract, you have to negotiate that, and then also you have to negotiate leaving civil service or not. So I guess my first question is, are those 2 things to be negotiated separately? My second question is, given the fact that you don't have a working contract, does that make this feel even more kind of precarious?
I'll take a stab at it. I'm not sure I have all the answers that you're looking for, but civil service is something that is in our contract. It says that we are guided by civil service. We go through the civil service process. So I'm not totally positive of how you would negotiate that section of it. There is a way. It's impact bargaining. I'm not familiar with it. I haven't done much of impact bargaining or anything to that. That would be, I would have to ask our union lawyers how that goes. But civil service is in our contract right now. So, and yeah, we don't have a contract. That sometimes happens. There's different things that delay negotiations, things going on in town, and obviously COVID and everything else. So it doesn't worry me that we don't have a contract, so to speak. I mean, it would feel better if we had a contract, but the contract that's in place now stays in effect. So it's not like we're not covered. So I don't know, maybe Kristen may have that answer about negotiating it in or out. She's got a little bit more experience with me than me.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to negotiate it out. In civil services, it's like on page 1 of our contract. But again, the fact that, as I said, it's just what worries me is that if we had like town meeting voting it out, the whole thing is like, if town meeting votes it out, what's the timeline? Are they going to rush us so that we don't even really have the time to put together the language? Because when they first proposed it to us, many years ago, different human resource person, different town administrator, different everyone across the table. They had said, you know, use like Wellesley's language. Well, I don't want to just use some other department's language. I mean, as the firefighter said, each department is different. I want the time to hammer it out. I don't want to be under some kind of time constraint with the contract. I mean, we know with the budgets, my officers are well aware that we're not going to have any cost of living, and we know that the town doesn't really have, you know, much on the table to bargain with us due to all the budget cuts. But I would like to have the time, you know, and just them trying to get this pushed through without us even talking about it just feels like they're just dangling that over our head and not really bargaining in a fair way. And I just want to make one thing to say about with the budgets, when they talk about cost savings, I'm very involved with the hiring process, and with or without civil service, the hiring process is a very long process. There are, you know, an extensive background check. There's interviews. There is the medical exam. There is the psychological exam. And then there's the physical abilities test that both the fire and police have to take. And those are only offered twice a month. So, and then on the police side, we have to have everything done before we can even ask for an academy spot. And there's only about, you know, maybe 6 academies, you know, that are running, you know, that are within a decent distance, you know, that are a far drive for us to send a recruit. So be it civil service or not, you know, they're talking about how long it takes to hire. It's really not the civil service. It's just the whole entire hiring process. It has to do with the state and with the lack of academy spots and with a lot of changes going on. So the money saving part, going on a civil service is not going to save us money with the hiring, because the hiring process, and it should be a long process. You want to do a thorough background investigation. You want to make sure, you know, they take the psychological exam and the physical, and then the physical abilities test. But as I said, you can only take a candidate can only take the physical abilities test is only twice in 1 month that they have the chance, because the week before it's a practice and a test, and the practice and a test. So, and then until they're all done, then I can ask the academy. I mean, the MPTC for an academy spot. And then it's whichever spot is open. So going on a civil service is not going to save us money. It's not going to make the hiring really that much quicker because of the long process that goes on with it. And I just don't like the fact that they're using that because you're not fully educated in the long process. I mean, Ross can say with the fire academy, there's only one fire academy for the entire state.
No,
Or is it
no.
two now?
Hold on, Chris. No, there's multiple academies for us now.
Okay, I thought there was only one.
Yeah, Mass DFS opened up 2 more besides Stowe. We use Brookline, and the Metro Fire, Boston has opened up their fire academy to the Metro departments, which Belmont is a part of. So we have 5 really good academies now around. So it should.
But that's still 5 for the entire state.
Yep.
And that's
absolutely.
what people don't understand. That's the entire, that's for the entire state. That includes the Vineyard, Nantucket, all of the Cape. We have the same thing. We only have a certain amount of academies, and that's for the entire state. So, but yeah, I don't like this. I'm just being flat out. I don't like the fact that we've had plenty of time to negotiate it, and they have not talked to us at all about this. All of a sudden, they're asking town meeting to make the decision, and they're just going to hold it over our head when we're negotiating. That's just the way I feel.
Okay, Joe Bernard from Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hey guys, Joe Bernard, Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. I wasn't sure how similar my question was to Aaron, so I put my hand down, but put it back up because I think it's a little bit more specific. So I'm trying to understand the fact that Chief McIsaac and Acting Chief Haley support Article 10. Are we saying they're just using the system wrong, or are we saying something else here that would explain that? How do I think about that?
I can't speak for Acting Chief Haley and Chief McIsaac. All I'm saying is I think that the system that's in place could be used a bit better, or some of the restrictions taken off if there's certain things that the town is. I think it's a simple call to civil service and asking for some help. I'm sure they're open to that. So I do know that both chiefs came up through the civil service program. They took civil service tests. They got promoted. They worked their butts off to do that, and you know, they did well. So they're at the position where they are now.
I mean, two points that I would make, Joe, and this is my opinion, not anybody else's, but for one thing, the way it is now, completely open-ended, why would they not support it? Because it basically consolidates all power in their hands, apart from what's spelled out in the collective bargaining agreement. So it increases their authority and reduces their accountability. And the second thing, as has been suggested, is both of these gentlemen are hired and serve at the will of the select board and the town administrator. If the select board and the town administrator are telling them, we want to come out of civil service, is it in their professional best interest to buck that hard? Or is it in their professional best interest to go along with it? I think, again, those are my opinions and nobody else's, but those are some questions to ask yourself of what is, stand in their shoes, consider who makes a decision around hiring and firing them and what they're hearing from those people, and then say, okay, well, then that behavior makes sense. And
so sorry.
So that, again, just my opinion, but something to think about. Go ahead, Jake. Yeah. And then.
So again, Lieutenant McNeely from the fire department. I have a few comments, but just the things that come up. I think the civil service just hasn't been utilized to its full potential. I think there are things that we can investigate and change in order to try to optimize civil service. Now, does civil service have some inefficiencies that won't be able to be fixed? Certainly, as does everything in life, there's some inefficiencies. But the known is much better than the unknown. When we take a look at Wellesley, and just to clarify, they had mentioned the other night that in our contract, it has something about the Wellesley language. That was not put in there as a placeholder to come out of civil service to be unilaterally voted out of civil service. That was a placeholder that if for some reason due to budget cuts, civil service was dissolved, we would have a starting point. That wasn't an end all be all. You take Wellesley, for instance, like the firefighter had mentioned, they have a board of engineers, so 3 people that kind of vote to make a decision. In Belmont, both chiefs are strong chiefs. So they have the ultimate hiring and firing authority for their departments. Now, like the town has said, well, they have to talk with the board of selectmen or talk with the town administrator. That's true, but the town administrator can't tell them how to hire. And most of the chiefs can only be fired for cause. So it's a pretty tough thing to legally find for cause. So now you're taking the checks and balances of civil service where you have an arbitration, you have a kind of a process if there's an issue, and granted that could be negotiated in, but it just has not yet. So that's one point. Another point I have is Belmont has been down this road before. Town meeting has voted out civil service before, and it has to go to the legislature to be approved. Because Belmont before, again, did it unilaterally, when it got to the legislature, they said, well, where's the agreement or the discussions that you've had with your unions? And Belmont said, we don't have them. So they tabled it and civil service stayed. So this is kind of a rewind and play going back and forth again. So I think there's some, major things that we're going to talk about that. When we talk about cost savings, they threw up numbers, and I don't have them in front of me, but I want to say it was $375,000 for 4 open positions. Now, my background, I have a bachelor's degree in fire science, a master's degree in public administration, own my own business, so I'm pretty savvy when it comes to numbers, benefits, etc. And if you take the base salary of a patrolman, add in benefits, you're just about at $100,000. So if you have 4 openings, there's $400,000 that you're not paying out. And if it costs you $375,000 in overtime, that's a net profit of $25,000. Now, I'm not saying that you do not hire those openings, because I don't think that's appropriate either, but I think the numbers that they put up, they kind of twist in order to meet what they want to satisfy. There's a couple other things I want to chat about. And Ross did mention that we do have negotiation in the contract already. There's a bypass. So if there's a candidate that by interviews, background checks, etc., that they don't like, then yes, they have to do the paperwork to do a bypass, but that is part of the checks and balances. They just can't say, I don't like this person and bypass them. There is a mode to bypass somebody if you don't think they'd be a good fit for your department. So I think the biggest thing to take home is there's not cost savings. The diversity looking throughout the town probably isn't going to change coming out of civil service, and we're going to have to start marketing Belmont. We are not the highest paid firefighters, we're not the highest paid police officers. And for me, I came from a non-civil service full-time fire job to Belmont to be in civil service. So looking at those things, how are we going to market Belmont if, hey, come to Belmont, you're not going to have any layoff protections. And by the way, we might have impending layoffs in April because of our budget deficits.
Okay. Okay.
So that's all I have.
Yep. Thanks, Jake. Okay, we got Chris Doyle has the final question, and then it's coming up on 6 o'clock, and so I don't want to keep anybody too long. So Chris, ask your question, and then
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just a quick, I think I heard either Mr. McNeely or maybe someone else from fire indicate that having fewer than 10% of our firefighters as female was a good number and a number we should be proud of. And I was surprised by that characterization. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't mishear that we should be proud of having fewer than 10% female firefighters.
No, that was completely misunderstood. What I was making a correlation to is our department, our fire department versus other fire departments, both in civil service and out of civil service. We have a much higher number percentage-wise than the other departments. So that was a correlation. I think we should have many more, but I don't truly believe that coming out of civil service is going to increase that number.
And are you making that statement based on data?
Yes. So there are data. So if you look
I'd be very interested in the data that you have that shows that people coming out of civil service have continued to not have have continued with a low number of female firefighters. That would be data I'd be very interested in seeing. So I could.
Sure. Could you throw your email in the chat?
Yeah, I could give Paul my info. He has my email address, and you could show me the data you have about that. I'd be very interested in that.
Oh, certainly. Yep.
I think I would like to just make a quick comment to that, Paul, if that's okay. I know you're throwing your hands up.
Okay, go ahead. I don't want to keep anybody too long, but go ahead.
I'm sorry. Brittany Taylor, I'm a part of the Belmont Fire Department. I am one of the females, obviously, that is lucky enough to be a part of the Belmont Fire Department. I would like to add to Chris's point, there's just, unfortunately, and trust me, I am so pro-female, pro-getting females in the door and being on the fire department. It's such a great job, but not a lot of females. And this is just generalized, especially from me being in the field for about 8 years now, not with Belmont, but just in emergency medical services as well as firefighting. There are just not that level of females out there that want to be firefighters as much as the male population. And I know that that sounds crazy, but unfortunately, that is the way it is. And the numbers are like that, is that the male population, there's a lot more interest in firefighting than in the female population.
This is a long-term, go out into high schools, have a program with resources to identify and recruit people into these professions, which are amazing professions, provide you with a great job and a mission. But, this is not a problem that Belmont can solve on its own. And because there's a scarcity problem, we compete with other towns for these same candidates. It's not like we're the only town that wants to diversify its police.
Sure. I work in finance, which is a male-dominated industry, and the reason that there's been progress on women in that industry is because of long-term sustained commitment from employers and pressure from the outside. And that would need to happen here, and there are multiple avenues for doing that. So I appreciate I appreciate you speaking up, firefighter, and I forgot your last name. I forgot. It was Kristen. Thank you. So I appreciate you speaking up, but I agree with both of you that this is a long-term problem, but I think that there are many vehicles for addressing it. One might be civil service, one might be the union contracts and union negotiations. There could be many that we maybe could be open to.
May
Paul,
can I just jump in for a second, Paul?
I wanted to just
hold on.
Go ahead.
One second. I just want to say that we believe that as well, and I teach the SAFE program in Belmont, and my fellow co-teacher is Tracy Mullen, who is our firefighter, who we actually, our very first female firefighter, who we got off of our layoff, the civil service layoff list from Arlington. We have been teaching the SAFE program in the kindergarten through 4th grade in each of the schools for over a decade now. And that is one of the draws of Tracy goes out of her way to speak with as many little girls that look up to her when they see her with her gear on, and they want to be like Tracy. And that's one of the schools, but it's also a byproduct of civil service, because that's how we got our first female firefighter.
Okay. In conclusion,
I,
Paul, can I just jump in for a sec?
I actually wanted to just let Dave, go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Paul, thank you so much for arranging for this meeting tonight, and for the other town meeting members, thank you so much for attending this meeting and for keeping an open mind. I would just like to say that we are very fortunate to have the level of service that we have in this town, both fire and police. I've been on the job for 26 years. I'm a captain, a shift commander. I'm also an instructor up at the Fire Academy, and I've been an instructor at the Massachusetts Fire Academy for 20 years. And I can tell you that there aren't a lot of women that come into the service. And the ones that do are excellent. And we have 4 examples of excellent firefighter, paramedic people that are females that are working in Belmont. But there aren't a lot of females that do come into the service. And for whatever reason that is, the ones that do get trained, and they come from civil service towns and non-civil service towns. So the pool isn't that big. What can we do to get that better? The SAFE program is a great program that Ross is talking about. That SAFE program reaches out to children of all ages. And we've had the SAFE program in the town of Belmont. I'm a former instructor of the SAFE program. And I'm also a person who works for the fire marshal's office at the state level for the SAFE program. And that reaches out to little school-aged females and males of all colors, creeds, ethnicities, and females of the same. So we are reaching out, we are branching out, we are trying, and we'd love to see more numbers of females come into the service, because they're very much appreciated and very much welcome.
may I say something to women who are somewhat younger than I am? We've just had the death of a Supreme Court justice who would not have almost couldn't have gotten into law school when she applied, never mind got to the Supreme Court. When I went to graduate school, trust me, I went to Minnesota, we had to fight to get admitted, and were asked why we were taking the place of men, and some of us who graduated got asked how many words we could type a minute. And we got through, and yes, I have a horribly advanced degree in political science, but I fought for it. And who would ever have thought, Kristen and Brittany, that we would have, from where I sat, that we would have women in the police department and women in the fire department? It was unheard of. So you guys have done well, and I think you guys need to know it. And I think, is it slow? Yeah. Would we like it to be faster? Sure. But look how far we've gotten. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, if there are any final just closing comments from Ross, Kristen, Regina, I wanted to give you a chance just to say any final words to our town meeting members who are still on the line. We've got about 60 of them, so there's still a pretty good audience here. And then let's break. And thank you all so much for taking the time this afternoon to come in and inform everybody. I think this was really useful.
I would like. Yeah, Kristen.
I'd like to say thank you very much to all the town meeting members. Being someone who's grew up in this town, whose parents grew up in this town, I really do love this town, and it's great to see town meeting members taking their position so seriously and just taking the time to really, not just vote on something just because you're told by the town, like this is what's best for the town. You're actually doing your research, and you're taking the time to really find out the true answers before you vote on something as serious as this. And we do appreciate everyone just, taking the time.
Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to just echo what Kristen said, that, I want to thank all the town meeting members for coming out with great questions. Especially thank you to Regina Caggiano from Civil Service for giving factual answers to people's questions. And I just want to reiterate again that the police and fire departments are open to talking about anything, negotiating. If we can build a better system, I'm all for it. But let's have the discussion. Let's do it open and work together to make a better system. Let's not force one way or the other. So again, thank you very much to all the town meeting members and the hosts and Ms. Caggiano.
Thank you so much. Regina, any final words before we break?
No, just again, want to really thank everyone. Appreciate the opportunity. And again, if there are any questions that you have about civil service, I'd be more than happy to look into it. I know I already owe somebody one question, but any more, just email me at any time.
That will do. I will be, just for everybody, this has been recorded. I will be circulating the list. We'll be circulating a link to the video out to the town meeting members. So, if you know somebody who didn't get a chance to see it, or you wanted to come back and review some of it, you'll be able to do that. Okay. And
quick question.
Sure, go ahead, Fitzy.
When you send that out, would it be possible to include contact info for example, Ms. Caggiano and the union representatives that we heard from tonight as well? I'm not going to ask the poor Wellesley firefighter to be inundated with our questions, but I'm hoping that at least the other folks who have been around here, and Ms. Caggiano has so nicely said that she'll answer questions. So if you could maybe provide with that recording the relevant contact emails, I think that would be super helpful.
I will make sure with all of our guests that they're comfortable with that, but if they are, I'm happy to circulate their contact info. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay. Hey, thanks everybody. Once again, Belmont Town Meeting really showing up. I really appreciate it. We have more than 90 people on the line at one point, so that's great. And thank you so much for taking part. Ross, Kristen, all the members of BFD and BPD.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Regina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.